I was just always fascinated with horror movies, even as a little kid. My mom wasn't so thrilled because I would not sleep at night lots of times after watching old Dracula movies and with Christopher Lee and stuff like that. Most people think any kind of movie or TV show, it's all glitz and glamour. It's a lot of downtime, typical week. I don't know. It's just a lot of networking, finding these films, finding productions, build a rapport with certain people. Obviously, if they like working with you, they call you back. Don't get discouraged. You can't get discouraged in this business, that's for sure, from being told no, because it happens all the time. Even if it's even if it's a bad film or one that you don't like, you can always learn. It's an ongoing experience.
This week on American Reel, I sit down with horror film actor Timothy Crow Ohearn. Tim gives us an insider's view of what takes place behind the scenes of a horror movie and talks about his journey of pursuing his passion as a career. From popsicle sticks being shoved in his eyes to having his leg severed in half, after listening to Tim, you may never look at the making of a horror movie the same. And now, without further ado, I bring to you Timothy Crow Ohearn. Welcome to American Reel. This is Roger Brooks, and today my very special guest is Timothy Crow Ohearn. Tim,
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
It's so awesome. I was really looking forward to sitting down with you today. You are a horror film actor, and that's not something you hear every day. So I'm really interested to talk to you about this. But before we get started, can you tell us about how you acquired your nickname, Crow?
Crow. Well, from the original movie with Brandon Lee.
Yes.
I was a big fan of that film.
Okay.
I think a lot of it has to do with because he died in the production of the film,
Okay.
making it, and so I used to dress up as him for Halloween, and I also have several tattoos of the Crow.
Okay.
Brandon Lee as the Crow.
Yes.
So just
So was it someone you, when you were young, did you idolize him as aspiring to do this, when you became an adult?
somewhat. I mean, just something about the storyline. How he comes back to avenge people that did him wrong.
Right.
So
Nice. So take us back to when you were growing up. How did all this come to be where you became interested in horror films? And I understand that even at a young age, you produced your own film.
yeah. I was just always fascinated with horror movies, even as a little kid. My mom wasn't so thrilled because I would not sleep at night lots of times after watching old Dracula movies and with Christopher Lee and stuff like that when I was 9 or 10 years old. So
And
she wasn't too thrilled about it, but I was just always, I don't know, it was something about those films that I always wanted to watch them, even though they scared the living hell out of me. But
just something about it that attracted you to that.
Yeah.
And how did you get into actually wanting to do your own film when you were a youngster?
Same thing. I just thought it was really cool, so I made this little 8mm film. Basically, it was basically the same thing as, I don't know if you ever seen I Was a Teenage Frankenstein. It was an old movie. So I played the doctor, and then I had a couple of my friends play the other roles, and I set it all up and had a friend of mine. It was my mom's camera, 8mm camera, so I had a friend of mine run that, and we just put it together.
That's awesome. So, as you're growing up, you're watching these films, you're starting to produce your own films, and then what happens, as you get through your teens, and when was the first actual taste of doing a real film?
Probably the first time I was on set was a local in Binghamton, Christopher Johnson, who had moved to Hollywood when he was 18 to do special effects. Came back and wrote and directed and starred in this local film, and that kind of got me on the roll to actually get into movies, acting.
And what was the name of that film?
Trying to think now.
It was back in the what was it? In the
90s.
In the early 90s. Okay, great, great. And that propelled your career.
Pretty much. That really got me interested in.
At least gave you the bug.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And then I was an extra in Annapolis, which was a boxing movie done in Philadelphia with James Franco and Tyrese.
Okay. Great. Great.
So that got me kind of, at least on set, and seeing how everything was done.
Mm-hmm. So from there, what was your first serious role when you started to move up the ladder, and because your resume, you have so many films that you acted in.
Right.
When did that all start to come to be?
It was a couple years after the Annapolis thing. I actually had some friends. I'm a drummer as well. I played in bands for 30, 40 years. And I had some musician friends up in Buffalo, and they were like, hey, they're doing this film up here. Would you be interested? And I was like, sure. That's my other passion. So I did a few smaller things up there, and then in line with the music again, we played the punk band I was in at the time. We played in Tampa, Florida, and this band that we opened for, their manager, this girl, introduced me to Marcus, who was special effects, makes his own movies and stuff. And so a couple months later, after we left Florida, he contacted me and wanted to know if I would be interested in being in his film, which is 100 Tears. It's pretty much has a big cult following. It's a killer clown movie, very, very gory. That's Marcus's thing.
Okay.
So.
And what happened to you in that film?
I get my right leg chopped off.
Okay. So walk us through that, okay? Because obviously, 99% of the population, when they're watching these films, have no idea how all this is put together. So can you give us some visuals as to what's happening on set? How does a scene like that come together?
A lot of preparation. I mean, the special effects stuff, and I think it's still what amazes me about that, is these guys work hours and hours making fake appendages and all this stuff, and when you watch the film, the final product, it's 5-10 seconds of the movie,
Right.
I mean, you're talking about all that work and time and money.
And is there preparation on your end, or is it really the crew that is doing all the prep?
Something like that. It's more the crew and the effects guys. Obviously, we run through it.
And are you usually, so for example, how did the leg get cut off?
In the film, the clown has this huge meat cleaver. I mean, it's and And it was really, it was made out of steel, metal too. It wasn't plastic or rubber.
Okay.
So.
And that was my question. So they're using actual props.
Well, that one they did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does it get to a certain point where before it actually would hit your leg, or is there a prosthetic there? How does that?
Well, there was a prosthetic sticking out, and my leg, there's a hole cut in the table. My leg is actually
okay
in the table.
And then from the standpoint of the after, or you said that they're doing a lot in the production part of it, right? To make that scene come alive. Is there any blood? Is there anything?
Oh yeah, that's one thing with Marcus's films. There's buckets and buckets of blood. So what they did is they run a big hose up through my pant leg. So when that happened, and then they had a big funnel behind the frame.
Okay.
So when that happened, they're just pouring this gallon jug of blood through there, and it just spurts everywhere.
So what are they using for the blood? What's the actual substance?
That varies depending on what you're doing. If it's something that you're going to have in your mouth, they normally use, you just use Karo syrup.
Okay.
And food coloring.
And then if it's something like the leg, it's a different substance.
That was, I think Marcus actually at that time used like a paint or something. It wasn't really.
Okay. And what happens if you don't get the scene right? You have to do it all over again? That's
a tough thing about that stuff, especially in the independent film, lower budget. Lots of times you have one shot
to make it right.
Yeah, so hopefully it works.
Now, tell us about the scariest scene that you've ever been in. Was it that one, or have there been others?
Scariest as far as?
For the viewer.
As far as the viewer?
Yeah.
That's probably one of them. My mom wasn't so thrilled when she saw it.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
She was like, "Oh my God, your leg's gone." But yeah, that was one of them. That, and I just did a film about a year ago in Erie, Pennsylvania, Blood Prism. It's kind of like the American Psycho 2 is a female killer. She actually, in that, I get popsicle sticks stuck in my eyes.
Popsicle sticks in the eyes. Wow.
That's pretty gruesome.
So how are they doing that scene?
They make a prosthetic that goes over your eye with a stick stuck in it.
Okay. And are you able to see it all?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Yeah, so a funny story about that is they were getting ready to shoot the first part of that when I get the first one. So Mark, a different Mark, puts the prosthetic on, and then the guy shows up with lunch. So I'm trying to eat. I got with one eye because I got the prosthetic thing stuck out of my face.
I'm sure that you have some good pictures of that.
And trying to eat lunch.
That's funny.
So then obviously when they did the second one, like they were helping me because I was in like the kitchen. The scene, to set up the scene, she's eating a popsicle, and then I obviously I couldn't see a thing, so they're helping me around, and that's kind of, I wouldn't say scary, but it's weird because I was like that for a while. I mean, to do something like that, obviously it's just a short scene in the film, but
right,
to shoot it and
it could be an
prepare.
all-day type thing.
Yeah, I was like that for probably an hour.
Wow.
Couldn't see anything. So
how are you preparing, mentally for these scenes? Is it something that, you're working really hard beforehand and getting into character, just like any actor would for a scene like this?
Yeah, typically. And lots of times I like to kind of get away from everybody else. Just kind of sit and just kind of mentally prepare myself for these things.
Would that be considered like your own form of meditation, or?
Yeah, somewhat, I think.
Just to get into the role and, yeah.
The one short film I did called Death House, where it's kind of like a Texas Chainsaw type thing. I'm a killer. I have this leather mask thing on. He purposely, before the first scene I was in, I wasn't allowed, nobody seen me other than the director. The actors that were going to interact with me in the scene didn't have any idea what I looked like.
Wow.
Or anything. So
I bet they were stunned.
that was to get that reaction on,
Right.
on film.
Right.
When I first come out. So.
And again, was that a one-take situation?
I don't remember if we did more, but I know we did that purposely.
Yeah, to get that effect. Awesome. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about makeup. Is there a lot involved with makeup, and have you gotten into that as far as, so you talk about the eyes and all these different things. I mean, that's really a craft in itself
Oh yeah, definitely.
of preparing. So are you proficient in that, or have you any experience with the makeup part of it?
No, I mean, just like some blood and certain little things, but yeah, no, I haven't gotten into making prosthetics, and I understand the process pretty much,
but that's all done for you. So you're
Yeah.
just you're there, and they handle that. Okay. So what's happening today? What are some of the latest roles that you've been in? You mentioned one earlier, but what's your career like? What's a typical week like for you?
Typical week. I don't know. It's just a lot of networking, finding these films, finding productions, build a rapport with certain people, and obviously, if they like working with you, they call you back.
Right.
So.
And is that how it is? Have you had repeat offers because of
Yeah, the
prior
Blood
films?
Prism movie in Erie, I had done a previous film with him called Angel of Reckoning.
Okay.
So, and actually he has another film coming up in a couple months that he just talked to me about that I'm cast in. This is more of actually like an old school martial arts film.
Okay.
But I don't know, I don't have any martial arts background, but I guess I'm just gonna be like the brawler.
Okay. I'd like to go a little bit deeper with this if we can.
Sure.
And tell us, because again, this is a pretty unique role that you play, and this is not something you hear every day where someone's an actor in horror films. So, how did you know, like, what inside you at a young age? I know you like to watch the films and whatnot, but so what takes it from enjoying to watch horror films to actually wanting to do it as a career?
Right. I don't know. I've always liked the old Friday the 13th films. I've always just seen myself playing Jason Voorhees for whatever reason. Just the way he moves, and I don't know. Sometimes now when I watch films, I wish I wasn't involved in the other aspects of it, like making them. Because now when I watch things, I point things out. I know how that was done, and things like that. I don't sit and enjoy it like like the average person does, because I'm critiquing, or just I know the inside story,
Right.
if you will, on how all that stuff is made and done.
So you were in a feature. You were the lead actor, right, in a couple of films.
Yes.
And what is that process like? Because now it's not only being involved in a scene, but there's a lot more lines, I'm sure. And how are you preparing for a role like that? And what was that?
The one was it was actually a short film made locally called Rhythm. I play a retired hitman. He gets avenged he kills this couple, and then their son, who was present, he was very young, and then he comes back to avenge, to get me.
Okay.
So that was a different role. I actually won Best Western New York Actor at the Buffalo Dreams Film Festival for that one.
Oh, great! Congratulations.
And it was actually a student film.
Okay.
And I've done several films with Mick, who wrote and directed that since.
Okay.
I was really impressed with his work, and so.
And from being a lead actor in a short film like that, being a supporting actor, do you have to have an agent? What's the best way of, getting casted in these roles?
Yeah, I don't have one at the moment. That's one of the things I'd like to look into.
Okay.
That's one of my goals, is to get into some bigger productions.
Sure.
And get somebody behind me.
Okay. So one of the things I wanted to tell you a story. So I was actually born on Halloween, and
Nice.
yeah. So growing up, my birthday was always a big event, because the kids in the neighborhood would all come over, and we would all go out, and but I was never one to really enjoy horror movies. I liked watching them, but I was one of the guys that was just right. So so it's just interesting being born on Halloween and having this kind of ongoing stigma to me that
Right.
I'm part of everything that goes along with it. So I've tried to turn that into a positive, and for me personally, and typically we'll have a party every year and dress up and make it really fun, and it's just a fun time of year.
Right. Well, every day's Halloween for me.
That's right. So what's next for you? Where do you want to take your career?
Like I said, I don't need to be, the big time lead, Tom Cruise or anything at this point. I would just like to get involved in some big time things, projects. It's kind of hard to do in this area.
And that's a good point. So when you're in a smaller town, and especially for some younger actors who are aspiring to act in horror films, what's your advice? If you are from a smaller town, how do you get out there? How do you network?
Facebook,
Yeah.
Instagram, Twitter, all that stuff.
So social media has probably really helped
Social media
in that regard.
Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't. I've actually gotten cast just from people seeing my page.
Okay. From Facebook. No kidding.
And
Wow.
I got cast in one film. I'm on IMDb,
Okay. Which is, can you tell people about
Internet
that?
Movie Database.
Right.
Which is where you can find, it's what I call my movie Bible. It's got whatever you want to know about any actor, director, producer, TV show, anything. It's all there.
And when you're on IMDb, that's how people are able to see your resume. I would assume your photos up there, and it lists all the films you're in.
Right.
Okay.
And I got cast from that in a couple of films, actually. That's where they found me.
Oh, cool.
So
That's awesome.
It works.
Yeah, it works. So outside of the horror films, what other acting have you done?
I've actually been in a couple of TV shows that on the ID channel, the true story reenactment type things.
Okay.
The latest one, I was on an episode of Deadly Affairs. It's about I think it was Pottsville, Pennsylvania. This millionaire, he was a real estate guy, and his wife has an affair with actually her nephew, and the nephew sets up to kill the husband because he had this huge life insurance policy.
Okay.
So, and I played one of the accomplices to the murder, Artie Hall.
And what's the difference between TV and film?
TV is very last minute, kind of demanding. Like that was shot in Maryland. I was literally on my way to the shoot and in the car, and I got an email that I was going to be needed for another night.
Wow.
And
so things changed quickly.
Yeah, the first part of it was shot during the day, and then I was going to be needed that night too. Because it all depends on what they got done the previous day. Mm-hmm. You know, if they're behind schedule from the previous day shooting, then your shoot might be delayed.
Right.
So if they're ahead of schedule, they'll call you at the last minute and say, we're going to need you at noon instead of 3 or whatever.
And was there another TV series that you were on?
Yeah, Fatal Attractions, which aired on this same network. Mm-hmm. The episode I was in on that was about this lady that commits suicide. She had this boyfriend who was obsessed with snakes. He had like 200 snakes, and that's who I played.
I see.
And it literally had 200 snakes there. Like,
are you afraid of snakes?
I'm not crazy about them, but I'm not afraid of them. Like, I didn't have to handle them or anything.
Right.
But they did it. They had cobras, pythons. And actually, how she dies, she gets bit by a black mamba. Okay. And they actually had one, which is like, I think the deadliest snake, or one of them. So that was a closed set, which means they shot that. Nobody else was allowed in the room except for the actor and the people that were needed to shoot it.
I see.
So yeah, and like they said, it was weird because when being around them all day, you get kind of lax. I mean, you don't think you would, but because the covers, some of them were just fish tanks with a mesh cover, and like they had rattlesnakes and cobras and stuff, and they're like, just watch yourself, don't just lean, because there's a lot of standing around.
Right.
Most people think any kind of movie or TV show, it's all glitz and glamour. It's a lot of downtime.
Yeah. And is that hard? I mean, to jump in and out of a role when there's a lot of downtime?
It is. I think that's another reason for the seclusion, because usually they'll tell you that they'll give you a time frame when you're going to be needed. So.
And then are you literally just standing waiting for them to call you for that scene?
Sometimes, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, because it's all preparation.
Right. And then they're
lights
ready.
And
sure
and everything.
Everything has to be just so, and then they bring in.
And they bring you in, and you do your scene, and then you're done for a while again. Typically, I mean, not always, just depending on the shoot. But
right. Could be hours.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, tell us about your music career. So you said you're a drummer, and how long have you been playing?
Oh, 35, maybe going on 40 years.
Wow. And is that something that's steady? Are you in a band currently?
I'm not. I just started playing with some guys locally.
There's always a need for a good drummer, right?
That's what I'm told.
Yeah.
But I was in a punk band previously, and we played all over. We played New York City, Philadelphia. Like I said, we went to Florida.
Okay.
That was fun too. That's just like the acting. What I really liked about that is the traveling, playing in different towns, meeting new people. And typically, especially that kind of music, there's 3 or 4 bands. Typically, you get up and play an hour. But just that whole making new friends and other places and bands.
Awesome. So Tim, tell us about your journey overall. How has the ride been, and what are you hoping to do in the future?
I love it. Sometimes it's trying, disappointing, and now with social media and the way with the internet, you can do video auditions like Like last year, I did a film in Oregon, and I did a video. I sent the guy a video audition. Obviously, I wasn't going to fly to Oregon to audition.
But you were able to secure the role through a video. That's awesome.
Yeah, but there's a lot of don't get discouraged. You can't get discouraged in this business, that's for sure, from being told no, because it happens all the time. Happens more than you'd like to admit, I think.
Sure.
And I think I believe a lot of it has to do with the look, your look that they're going for. You know, your acting could be great in the audition, but if you're just not really like what they're envisioning.
And who's making that decision? Is it the director, typically?
Typically in independent films, bigger films, they have a casting director who just kind of weeds out things. They get the auditions, the video auditions, or they hold the auditions, and then they might send them, here's the top 10 people I think, you know, for this.
And then when they see you and they know that they say, that's our guy.
So they'll send it to the actual director and say, here's 10 people that I see that could do the role, and then it's up to them to choose who they actually want.
I see.
Or they might call you in to audition again. They might call those 10 people in, excuse me, or ask you to do another video audition.
I see. What's your greatest accomplishment to date?
I don't know if there's one. In some of the films I've actually executive produced, which basically just means I've invested. And I had a production company. We invested in some of the films, and then locally the short films. I'm typically a producer. Actually, we did one that I didn't act in. I helped with just about everything else. So I kind of like that whole process. I like getting involved. And this summer, I'm planning on shooting my own short film that I wrote. I'm going to direct it. I'm not going to be in it. I'm going to have nothing to do with that.
Okay. So you're starting to get on that side of it.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think it helps with the acting too, because obviously you know more of the technical things, maybe what they're looking for.
So, any regrets?
None. But I always say, even if it's even if it's a bad film or one that you don't like, then you can always learn. It's a ongoing experience, like learning wise. You can learn what not to do next time.
Right. I'm just amazed that I don't know how many feature horror films come out a year, but it doesn't seem to be a lot, right? I mean, what are there, a handful?
It's gaining popularity as far as like big feature theater released films, but it's still a big lower budget independent. And film festivals, I don't know if you know anything about film festival circuit or that. There's a ton of those that are just basically horror themed film festivals.
And something like that, they may feature what, several dozen films?
Depending on how long it runs.
Okay.
The big one in Buffalo that we've had most of our local films in, that runs like a week now.
Okay.
And typically, one of the last days, like a Sunday, they'll have, it'll just be all short films.
And I guess my question is, how come we don't see more of these mainstream? Is it difficult to get the audience? Because there seems to be, a big audience for horror films.
Right. I mean, it's gaining popularity as far as that goes. But I don't know. I don't know if it's the big investors in Hollywood are don't want to take that chance. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, it seems like there's always something that comes out around Halloween time.
Right.
You know, the big one of the year that that people look forward to. If you could go back and talk to your 20-year-old self, knowing everything you know now about the industry, about all the mistakes you learned from, what advice would you give?
Just push through it. Don't give up, that's for sure. And and I always talk about, it's kind of weird when you're shooting a film, you're all hyped and everything, and then when it's done, you almost get, it's like post-production blues, I call it, because it's just the big, you're so high for that amount of time, just, you know, from shooting a film, and then all of a sudden it's done.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure that's not easy.
Yeah, it's weird. It's kind of weird. It just, like I said, it's weird how it's just, you almost, I wouldn't say depression, but you just, it's a big crash basically after a shoot, especially if you're involved in the major part of it. If you're not just there for a day or so, depending. And then there's all that time in between from actual shooting to release. Editing is a huge thing. Like,
Sure.
Like it's typically probably a year, maybe even more before it releases.
It all comes together.
Yeah. And typically at this level, there's, you know, everybody has day jobs as well, so it's not like that's what they're doing
Right.
every day. So,
What's the biggest setback that you've seen on set since you've been doing this?
probably has been on set. It's probably an effect doesn't go right. Because lots of times it's a lot of prep to just even get to that point.
Mm-hmm.
So then now you gotta do that all over again.
And any setbacks for the film releasing itself? Has anything ever happened that put it behind, or?
Yeah, the one short film. Actually, it was the one I wasn't acting in. They spilled wine in this computer, this laptop, and we were trying to get that done to submit it for the Buffalo Film Festival as well. We made it.
Did you lose everything? Did you lose all the?
No, luckily we didn't lose anything.
Okay.
It just, the computer, he couldn't edit with it, just the way it was acting.
I see.
It didn't crash or anything, but
so lesson
certain buttons didn't work. Certain things didn't work.
Don't have wine on the set, right? Yeah. That's great. Well, look, this has been great. I mean, we learned so much today about you and your story and your journey in growing up, being intrigued with horror films, and then actually getting into the business and doing it and living it. And that's wonderful, because not everyone is able to do that.
Right.
And but before I let you go, I always ask one last question, and that is, what do you want your legacy to be?
I guess just that I was this big scary guy. I don't know.
Gave people a lot of joy, right?
And hopefully.
Yeah. Even though you're scaring people.
Right.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Tim, thanks so much. Can I call you Crow?
Yeah, sure.
Crow, thanks for coming in. We appreciate you being on American Real, and now you're part of the family.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Thanks for doing this.
Thanks.